My name is Ursula. I'm 32, married, and every night I walk into a world that doesn't belong to my husband. It belongs to me. The neon lights, the hum of jazz, the clinking of glasses. They remind me that I'm still alive beneath the layers of routine that my marriage has quietly buried. When I tie my hair, put on the same black dress, and step behind the bar, I'm not Mrs. Ursula Martin anymore. I'm just Ursula, the woman who smiles for strangers and listens to their stories while pretending she doesn't have one of her own. At home, mornings are silent. The kind of silence that hums louder than noise. Martin sits at the table, reading news on his phone, his coffee cooling untouched. I make toast, pour him juice, and we exchange polite words about groceries, bills, and the neighbor's new dog. He's a good man, steady, gentle, but his eyes never really see me anymore. Maybe they did once, when love was new and the world smaller, when we still held hands at traffic lights and laughed without effort. But now, everything between us is muted. Familiarity has become distance disguised as peace. I used to think marriage was supposed to feel like safety. But safety, I've learned, can sometimes feel like being locked inside a glass box. You can see everything, life, people, possibility, but you can't touch any of it. And so, when I'm at the club, surrounded by noise and movement, I feel the glass dissolve. The air smells of perfume, sweat, and whiskey. The music is low enough to let thoughts wander but loud enough to drown regret. Most nights pass the same way: orders, tips, fake smiles, fleeting compliments that mean nothing. I don't flirt, I perform. The customers think they're being charming, but I've learned to read desire from across a room, to navigate it like smoke. It's not personal. It's survival. Yet sometimes, when the lights hit a certain shade of red and the night slows down, I catch my reflection in a mirror behind the bar and hardly recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes are tired but hungry, for attention, for meaning, for something more than small talk and folded laundry. Martin doesn't ask about my nights anymore. At first, he did. How was work? How were the tips? Did anything interesting happen? But as time went on, he stopped expecting answers that mattered. I think he prefers not knowing, as if my world after sunset exists in another dimension. Maybe it's easier for both of us that way. We coexist without confrontation, sleep side by side without warmth, live together without touching. Marriage, after all, has its quiet ways of dying without ever ending. But then, one night, I noticed him. A man sitting alone near the corner table, nursing a glass of something amber and expensive. He wasn't like the others. He didn't scan the room searching for company or laugh too loudly to prove he wasn't lonely. He just watched. Not in the hungry way men sometimes do, but as if he was studying a painting, taking in the colors, the silence, the spaces between words. When our eyes met, I felt it, a small jolt, subtle but certain. I looked away first, pretending to rearrange bottles that didn't need rearranging. For the next few nights, he returned. Always the same seat, same drink, same quiet demeanor. He didn't flirt or ask my name. He just existed in that dim corner, occasionally meeting my gaze, offering a nod that felt more like recognition than greeting. It became a rhythm. I'd catch myself searching for him before my shift even started, scanning the room with an anticipation I refused to name. And when he was there, I felt an unspoken calm, as though my chaos had found something steady to rest against. It was wrong, of course, to feel that way. But infidelity doesn't start with touch. It begins in moments of noticing, the first glance, the first question you ask yourself about why someone's presence matters more than it should. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself it was harmless curiosity, but the human heart doesn't obey logic. It follows warmth. One evening, as I wiped the counter, I overheard one of the other waitresses whisper, "He's looking at you again." I laughed it off, told her she was imagining things, but inside, I knew she was right. He was. And I liked it. I liked being seen, not as a wife, not as a server, but as a woman with her own quiet gravity. The kind of attention that doesn't demand anything but still feels like a gift. That night, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, I felt his gaze again, steady, patient, unashamed. It made my hands tremble as I collected empty glasses. I told myself to breathe, to focus, to remember who I was. But for a brief moment, I wasn't the responsible wife or the dependable employee. I was just Ursula, a woman rediscovering the pulse she thought she'd lost years ago. When I walked home later that night, the streets were quiet, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I replayed the night in my mind, the way his eyes had followed mine, the strange electricity between two strangers who hadn't spoken a word. I told myself it meant nothing, that it would fade by morning. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. A door had opened inside me, one I wasn't sure I wanted to close. At home, Martin was already asleep. The room was dark except for the soft glow of the alarm clock. I changed quietly, slipped under the blanket, and stared at the ceiling. His breathing was steady beside me, but my mind was somewhere else, still in the flicker of nightclub lights, still hearing the low hum of jazz, still feeling that unseen gaze that had pulled me out of numbness. For years, I had lived like a ghost in my own life, present but unseen. But now, there was a pulse again, faint but real. And I knew this was how it began. Not with betrayal, not with a lie, but with a look that lasted a second too long, and a woman who finally remembered she still had the capacity to feel. He came again the next night. Same table, same drink, same quiet presence that seemed to fill the room without demanding anything from it. I told myself not to notice, but my body betrayed me before my mind could argue. My heartbeat changed the moment I saw him. It's strange how familiarity can grow out of silence, how a stranger can start to feel like someone you've always known without a single word spoken. Days blurred into weeks, and I began to measure time not by hours or dates, but by his presence. When Adrian came in, the night felt lighter, warmer. When he didn't, the room felt hollow, as if someone had turned the volume down on the world. I told myself I was being foolish, that it was nothing more than attention I craved. But it was more than that. It was the feeling of being known. I started choosing my lipstick more carefully, fixing my hair differently before leaving home. Martin didn't notice, of course. He rarely looked up when I said goodbye. And even if he had, he wouldn't have recognized the quiet rebellion in me, the one that began with a glance and was now growing roots in my chest. One rainy evening, the club was quieter than usual. Most of the crowd had left early, leaving only a few regulars scattered around. Adrian sat in his usual corner, his sketchbook open, a half-empty glass beside him. I wiped tables slower than I needed to, stealing glances at him between tasks. When the music softened and the bartender began stacking chairs, I felt a strange pull to stay just a little longer. He looked up as I approached. "You'll catch a cold walking home in this weather," he said. His tone was casual, but there was something underneath it. Concern, maybe longing, maybe both. "I don't mind the rain," I replied. "It hides things." We both smiled at that, the kind of smile that acknowledges truth without saying it. He gestured to the seat across from him. I hesitated for a moment, then sat down. The world outside the window was soaked and blurred, like a painting losing its edges. Inside, the silence between us deepened until it became something alive. "I shouldn't be here," I whispered. "I know," he said softly. "Neither should I." For a moment, we just sat there, two people on opposite sides of a line we both pretended didn't exist. Then he reached for my hand. The touch was gentle, almost careful, but it undid me completely. It wasn't desire that broke through, it was recognition. The kind that says, "I see you, even the parts you hide." I didn't pull away. Neither of us spoke. The air felt heavy with everything we'd been holding back. I could hear the rain outside, the faint hum of the last jazz note fading into silence. And in that silence, something in me surrendered. I won't describe what followed, because words would only make it smaller. It wasn't about bodies, it was about the moment two lonely souls stopped pretending they weren't starving. When it ended, we didn't make promises or apologies. We just sat quietly, his hand still over mine, as if letting go too soon would erase what had just happened. That night, when I walked home, the rain had stopped but the streets still glistened. My reflection followed me in every puddle, different, raw, alive, and terrified. At home, I stood by the door, unable to move. Martin's shoes were by the bed, his steady breathing coming from the next room. I looked at my hand where Adrian's had been, and for the first time, the ring on my finger felt like a weight I didn't know how to bear. I had crossed the line I once swore I never would. And yet, beneath the shame, there was something else, a cruel, beautiful truth. I finally felt something again. The days that followed felt like moving through fog. Everything around me existed, but slightly out of focus. I went to work, came home, smiled when expected, answered questions I didn't hear. But beneath the surface, a quiet ache pulsed. The kind that doesn't scream, it just lingers, steady and merciless. I avoided Adrian, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of what we had started. Fear of how easily I could fall again. He didn't come for a few nights. At first, I felt relief, then an emptiness that scared me even more. When I finally saw him again, sitting in that same corner, we didn't greet each other. His eyes found mine for a second, and in that look was understanding. Some stories end not because they should, but because they can't go any further without destroying what's left. I served his drink, our fingers didn't touch this time. There were no words. Only silence. The kind that says goodbye. At home, I tried to fall back into rhythm. I cooked, cleaned, smiled at Martin when he asked about my day. But everything had changed. The walls of our house seemed smaller, tighter. I wanted to tell him something, anything, that might bridge the quiet distance between us. But what could I say? I made a mistake. I felt alive. I remembered what it's like to be seen. There are truths that have no language gentle enough to share. So I stayed silent, pretending I was still the woman he believed I was. One evening, while folding laundry, I found that napkin again, the one with Adrian's handwriting. You look happiest when you forget to pretend. I sat there staring at it, realizing how much truth was packed into those 8 words. Pretending had been my entire life. Pretending to be satisfied, pretending love hadn't faded, pretending I didn't need more. For years, I had been performing a version of myself I didn't even recognize anymore. And for a fleeting moment, someone had seen through the act. Adrian didn't come back after that week. No message, no note, just absence, clean, final, merciful in its own way. I missed him, not like a lover, but like someone who had reminded me that I still existed. What we shared wasn't built to last. It was a spark meant to burn, not to warm. And yet, it left a light behind, dim, fragile, but real. Months passed. The club remained the same music, same laughter, same flickering lights. But I wasn't the same. I still worked my shifts, still smiled at strangers, but there was something different in the way I carried myself. A quiet awareness. A knowing. I understood now that life doesn't offer clean lines between right and wrong, it only gives choices and the weight that follows them. Sometimes, when the lights dim and the night grows slow, I think of him. Not with regret, not with longing, just memory. Because maybe love isn't always meant to be forever. Maybe sometimes it exists only to wake you up, to remind you that beneath all the pretending, you're still alive. And when I walk home at dawn, heels clicking against the empty pavement, the city feels softer. The air cooler. I breathe in, and for the first time in a long time, I don't feel trapped in my life. I feel human, flawed, forgiven, and finally awake.